The moment he called me crazy in front of everyone, I felt my entire world tilt. There are moments in life when time doesn't just pass, it fractures. It splits into the before and the after, and nothing is ever the same again. That night, sitting at a dinner table surrounded by laughter, wine, and flickering candlelight, I felt that fracture. My husband's voice, steady, confident, cruelly casual, cut through me in a way that made every sound in the restaurant fade into a dull echo. He had looked directly at me, his lips curling into a smile for the sake of our friends, and said, "You're imagining things. You're being crazy again, jealous over nothing." The word crazy hit harder than the wine I had just sipped, harder than any insult ever could, because it wasn't just a word. It was a label, one that had been whispered before in private moments, but never hurled so publicly. And when he said it, with his voice dripping in charm and authority, it wasn't just meant for me, it was meant for them. For the friends who sat across the table, watching me, waiting to see how I would react. I had dressed carefully that evening, taking my time in front of the mirror before we left the house. My dress was soft navy, the kind of shade that made my eyes appear brighter. At least, that's what Michael always told me. I had chosen heels, even though I usually avoided them, painting my lips a shade deeper than usual because I wanted to feel like us again, like the couple who used to go out and laugh until our sides ached. Dinner with friends had always been a kind of ritual, a reminder that we were more than just bills and routines and half-finished conversations. At least, that's what I thought it would be. Instead, as the candles flickered between us, my excitement began to sink under the weight of something else. It started small. Michael's sharp glance when I asked him why he had stepped away from the table so long. His tight smile as he brushed off my question. The conversation moved on easily for everyone else, but for me, it lingered. I tried to laugh along, sipping wine to cover my unease, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was different. So I pressed a little harder, leaning toward him when our friends were caught up in their own story, whispering, "Who was it on the phone? You seemed upset." And that was crazy wife. Heat rushed to my cheeks, a flush of humiliation that no amount of wine could dull. My fork clinked against the plate as my hand trembled, and I forced a tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. I wanted to shrink, to vanish into the shadows of the restaurant, to escape the pitying glances and awkward laughter. My chest ached with the sharp, familiar sting of being dismissed, not just privately but publicly, my credibility shredded in front of people who mattered to us. I tried to remind myself of who Michael had been, or at least who I thought he had been. The man who had brought me flowers after our first big fight, saying he couldn't stand the thought of going to bed angry. The man who once left sticky notes on the bathroom mirror with little messages like, "You're beautiful," and "We've got this." The man who, in the early years, seemed to know my heart better than I knew it myself. But now, sitting across from me in a pressed blazer and a smile too polished to be real, I saw a version of him that terrified me. Gaslighting. That's what it was. The slow erosion of truth. The quiet war of convincing me that my instincts were wrong, my emotions irrational. And tonight, he had elevated it. He hadn't just silenced me in private, he had made me a spectacle. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat as the conversation stumbled back into motion around us. Sarah's laugh was a little too forced, Mark's tone a little too bright, as if they were trying to patch the hole that had just torn open at the table. But every glance I caught from them carried the same undercurrent: pity. And I hated it. I pressed my napkin into my lap, fingers twisting the fabric until it wrinkled, pretending to listen, pretending to smile, pretending everything was normal. But inside, a storm raged. Why had he done that? Why had he needed to put me down so forcefully, so publicly? What was he hiding so desperately that my question had threatened him enough to humiliate me like that? The waiter arrived with dessert menus, his cheerful tone cutting through the heavy silence I carried in my chest. I shook my head politely, unable to imagine eating another bite. Michael, of course, ordered something decadent, cracking a joke about how he deserved it after a long week. Everyone laughed again, the moment seemingly forgotten. But not by me.
Number, not work a name. Bold and clear, written in a way that told me instantly this was not random. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't recognize it, but the certainty that it mattered hit me like a punch to the gut. Michael's smile never faltered. He reached for his fork, cutting cleanly into his dessert, laughing at something Mark had said. But his other hand moved quickly, almost too quickly, sliding the phone toward himself, angling it just out of my view, silencing the glow with the press of his thumb. He didn't look at me. He didn't acknowledge what I had seen. But I knew. I knew because his movements were too practiced, too careful, because for the first time all night his hand trembled, just slightly, as he lifted the fork to his lips. And in that moment, the shame, the humiliation, the sting of being called crazy, all of it hardened into something sharper. Proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the cracks in our marriage weren't just paranoia. Proof that he was hiding something. I forced my face into stillness, my lips curving into a faint smile, as if I hadn't noticed, as if I hadn't just glimpsed the crack in his carefully built facade. But inside, every part of me was screaming, because I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was certain. And as I stared at the faint reflection of that name glowing on the edge of his glass, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This was only the beginning. His smile was flawless, but his hands were shaking. The restaurant glowed with the kind of warmth that usually soothed me. Soft, golden light from hanging fixtures, the low hum of conversation, and the occasional burst of laughter from nearby tables. But none of it touched me that night. My entire focus was on Michael, the man sitting across from me, the man I thought I knew. He leaned back in his chair, smiling with practiced ease at something Mark had said. His posture relaxed, his voice smooth. To anyone else, he was the picture of composure. To me, he was a man unraveling at the seams, because while his smile never faltered, his hands betrayed him. I saw the faint tremor as he lifted his glass, just enough to ripple the wine inside. He noticed my eyes flick down, and in an instant, desperate to keep me from... That's when the glint caught my attention. I tilted my own glass of red wine, letting it swirl gently, and in its curved reflection, I caught the faint glow of his phone. Resting in his lap, angled toward him, the screen lit up just long enough to bend its secret through the glass. I couldn't see the full message, not clearly, but the shape of it was wrong, too long, too deliberate to be a simple notification. It wasn't a reminder. It wasn't an email preview. It looked like words meant to stay hidden. My chest tightened. Michael's hand slid casually, almost lazily, to cover the phone, dimming the glow. "Work," he said lightly, like the word itself was a dismissal of my concern. He chuckled, adding, "They never leave me alone, not even at dinner." The way he delivered it was flawless, practiced, the kind of line that invited sympathy instead of suspicion. Amanda's face softened instantly, her husband nodding as though they understood the struggle of corporate life. Their laughter bubbled again, smoothing over the jagged edges of tension. But for me, the word work didn't smooth. It cut. I wanted so badly to believe him, to let it go, to unclench my fists under the table and sip my wine like everything was normal. But his hands had shaken, his jaw had tightened, and he had already dismissed me once tonight as crazy. The words stung fresh again, looping in my mind until I could barely hear Amanda talking about some vacation plans. Was I paranoid? Was I making a mountain out of a molehill? That's what he'd want me to think. That's what gaslighting does. It makes you doubt not just your instincts, but your very grip on reality. I straightened slightly, staring down at the napkin in my lap, twisting it between my fingers as if its fabric could anchor me. I replayed everything in my head, his sudden absence from the table earlier, the way his tone had shifted sharp when I questioned him, the dismissive laugh as he branded me jealous. And now this, secret messages flashing under the table while he played the role of doting husband in public. The conversation at the table moved on, but I couldn't follow. Amanda was describing an ocean view. Mark was joking about getting sunburned. Michael was laughing at all the right times, but I was somewhere else. Somewhere in the narrow space between suspicion and certainty. Me cold. My face looked pale, drained, my eyes wide with something between fear and fury. For a second, I barely recognized myself. I leaned on the counter in the restroom, gripping the cool porcelain sink with both hands, whispering under my breath, "You're not crazy." "You saw it. You know what you saw." The words wavered, but speaking them out loud gave me strength. I splashed cold water on my face, straightened my dress, and steadied my breathing. By the time I returned to the dining area, I thought I had braced myself, but I wasn't ready for what I saw. Through the glass door that led to the patio, framed by the soft glow of the restaurant lights, there he was, Michael, my husband. He stood with his back half turned, his phone pressed tight to his ear, his shoulders hunched with urgency. His lips moved quickly, his free hand gesturing in sharp, restless arcs. His polished, flawless mask had slipped entirely. This wasn't the composed man at the table. This was someone secretive, desperate, cornered. His voice was muffled through the door, but the rhythm of it was unmistakable. Fast, hushed, urgent. And in that instant, every shred of doubt dissolved. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't crazy. I was right. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching as he whispered urgently into his phone, his face taut with secrets. And I realized with a chill that the lie ran deeper than I ever imagined. When he returned, his mask was perfect, but his eyes betrayed him. Michael slipped back into his chair as though nothing had happened, his blazer still crisp, his smile polished. To anyone watching, he looked calm, collected, the very image of a man enjoying an evening with friends. But I saw it, the faint tremor in his hand as he reached for his wine glass, the way his eyes lingered just a fraction too long on me before darting away. His mask was flawless, but it couldn't cover the truth that seeped out in the smallest of details. I forced myself to nod along as Amanda finished her story, laughing lightly when Mark chimed in with a joke, but my stomach twisted with unease. Michael laughed too, even louder than usual, leaning back as if nothing at all had happened. But behind that ease, I saw it. The flicker of nerves, the shadow of something he could were a pattern. A pattern I had ignored because the alternative was too painful to face. I pressed my palms into my lap beneath the table, digging my nails into my skin just enough to anchor myself. The conversation swirled around me, but it felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater. Every laugh sounded hollow, every smile rehearsed. I looked at Michael and felt something sharp twist in my chest, a clash of love and suspicion so strong it left me breathless. Was I still clinging to the man who once left notes on my mirror, who once swore we'd never keep secrets? Or was I sitting across from someone I didn't know at all? The dinner finally wound down, our friends stretching and laughing as the waiter brought the check. Amanda hugged me tightly, her perfume lingering in the air, while Mark clapped Michael on the back with a hearty laugh. Their faces were relaxed, oblivious, content. They hadn't seen the cracks. Or maybe they had and chose to ignore them, just like I once did. Michael slipped his arm around me as we left, his hand warm on my shoulder, his voice low and charming as he thanked our friends for a wonderful evening. To anyone else, we looked like the perfect couple walking out into the cool night air. But inside, my heart pounded, my mind screaming questions I couldn't silence. The car ride began in silence. Michael adjusted the mirrors, started the engine, and pulled onto the quiet street. The hum of the tires against the pavement filled the space between us. I stared out the window, watching the blur of streetlights flicker across the glass. My hands clenched in my lap. I could feel his eyes flick toward me, could feel the weight of his silence pressing down. Then it happened. The dashboard lit up as my phone automatically synced to CarPlay. The screen glowed with icons, cheerful and innocent, until a banner appeared across the top. An incoming call log. Except it wasn't mine. It wasn't Michael's phone connected to the car. It was mine. But the history on the screen showed something that made my breath catch. A number I didn't recognize. Several calls, each marked as recent. Michael's hand shot out instantly, adjusting the volume, his movements too quick, too sharp. "Must be a glitch," he muttered, his voice low, strained. His fingers tapped the screen, fumbling as he tried to clear it, but before he could, a soft chime sounded through the speakers. My hands trembled in my lap, but I forced them still, staring straight ahead as though nothing had happened. Because in that single moment, I understood something with chilling clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't jealous. The proof was right there, echoing through the speakers, slipping past the mask he had so carefully built. A voicemail starts playing through the speakers, but he scrambles to turn it off, leaving me with only one haunting question. Who was she? And what did she know that I didn't? The voice that echoed through the car wasn't mine. It was hers. The sound filled the cabin, soft but distinct, carrying with it a weight that pressed down on my chest. It wasn't the casual chatter of a coworker, not the rushed tone of someone delivering urgent news. It was intimate, cautious, the kind of voice that doesn't just ask a question, it holds a secret inside it. Are you alone? I froze, every muscle in my body locking as though the seatbelt had suddenly tightened around me. The air felt thinner, my lungs straining to pull in enough. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe I had imagined it, that the strain of the evening, the humiliation at dinner, had twisted my senses. But I hadn't. The echo of her voice lingered, undeniable. Michael's reaction was instant, sharp, and frantic. His hand darted toward the screen, fumbling with the controls until the voice cut off, leaving silence so heavy it roared in my ears. His knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight enough to crack. That was nothing, he said finally, his voice low, controlled, the kind of tone he used when he wanted to end a conversation before it started. Work call. You know how people get, they don't respect boundaries. Work. Again with that word, the catch-all excuse he wielded like a shield. I turned my head slowly, studying him in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. His profile was calm, almost too calm, like a mask hastily glued back into place. But his hands betrayed him again. They gripped the wheel too tightly, tendons straining against his skin. That didn't sound like work, I whispered, my voice breaking despite my effort to steady it. He laughed, the endless loop of gaslighting that left me questioning not just him, but myself. The car rolled through the dark streets, streetlights casting fleeting shadows across his face. I stared at him. My husband. The man who once promised me forever. Who once swore he'd never keep secrets. And yet, sitting beside him now, I realized I didn't know who he was talking to late at night. Didn't know why his phone lit up with names I'd never heard. Didn't know what truths he buried beneath that flawless smile. And then, like a flash of lightning cutting through fog, a memory surfaced. Earlier that night at dinner, I had taken a live photo on my phone. One of those casual snaps I sometimes captured without much thought. Amanda had been laughing about something Mark said, and I had wanted to remember the moment. But live photos didn't just freeze an image. They captured the seconds around it. Tiny fragments of video and audio I had often forgotten existed. My heart skipped. I remembered Michael leaning close to me at the table, brushing it off as work when his phone had lit up. I had raised my phone to snap Amanda's laughter right around then, and live photos didn't lie. If I had caught it, if the sound had recorded, then proof wasn't just a memory in my head. It was there, waiting on my phone. I turned away from him, staring out the window, the streetlights blurring past like streaks of fire. My pulse hammered in my ears, part fear, part resolve. He thought he had buried the truth under charm and gaslighting, under public humiliation and private dismissal. But maybe, without realizing it, I had caught him in his own web. As the car hummed toward home, I remembered the live photo sitting quietly in my gallery. And for the first time that night, I wasn't just suspicious. I had a way to prove it. And I decided I would check it later, no matter what it revealed. I replayed the live photo, and the secret played itself out loud. Back in the quiet of our bedroom, the house still heavy with the silence that followed every fight Michael and I didn't admit was a I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand. My fingers trembled. That usually made me smile, but tonight it felt like background noise, a curtain lifting on something I hadn't been meant to hear. Then it happened. Over Amanda's laughter, faint but clear, Michael's voice cut in. Just stay calm. She won't notice I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The warmth drained from my body, replaced by something cold, sharp, electrifying. The laugh faded, replaced by the soft clink of a fork against a plate. And then another voice, a woman's voice. She's looking. You need to distract her. It was hushed, urgent, threaded with the same intimacy I had heard in the car. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't work. This wasn't harmless. This was a conversation happening right next to me, while I sat blind, believing I was safe. I replayed it again, my thumb trembling as I pressed the photo, needing to be sure. Amanda's laugh, Michael's calm reassurance, the woman's urgent warning. There was no mistaking it. The voices were real, the exchange was real, and they had been speaking in code right under my nose. My heart thudded in my chest, loud enough I feared it would wake Michael, who was already stretched out beside me, his back turned, his breathing steady in the rhythm of feigned sleep. I pressed my free hand against my mouth to smother the sob building in my throat. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't insecurity. This was proof. I played it again, over and over, the short seconds replaying like a broken record. The more I listened, the more I noticed. The edge in Michael's tone, the calculated calm. The woman's voice, sharp with command, not suggestion. They weren't improvising. They weren't reacting to me at that moment. They had been planning for me. My pulse quickened as I leaned closer to the screen, trying to catch every syllable. Between the ambient noise of the restaurant and Amanda's laughter, the words blurred, but the meaning was undeniable. They weren't worried about being caught by someone else. They were worried about me. I let the phone fall to my lap, my vision blurring with tears. The man I had trusted, the man I had defended, had been working with someone else, someone close enough to sit in the same restaurant, to murmur directions while our friends laughed around us, and I hadn't noticed. Shame burned in my chest. Myself was nothing more than a freak crash. The night I had buried deep because the memories were fractured, blurred, incomplete. The night he had told me over and over not to dwell on because it was in the past. And now here it was, rising out of the static of a live photo, the thing I wasn't supposed to hear, the thing he swore I would never know. I stared at the phone, my breath shallow, my heart pounding in my ears. The words echoed again and again, looping inside me until they no longer felt like fragments. They felt like a confession. I sat frozen in the dark, the glow of the screen lighting my trembling hands, the last words of the live photo pulsing through me like a curse. She'll never know what really happened the night of the accident. The accident I thought I had forgotten suddenly came back to life. The words from the live photo wouldn't stop echoing inside my head. She'll never know what really happened the night of the accident. They weren't just words anymore. They were a key, a door. And the moment they left Michael's lips on that recording, the lock inside my memory clicked open, and shadows I had buried for months began to stir. I lay there in bed with my phone still clutched in my hand, staring at the ceiling as fragments of that night returned to me, sharp and jagged. For so long I had convinced myself the accident had been nothing. A rainy night, slick roads, a car that skidded out of control. A fender bender that left me dazed, bruised, and foggy. At least, that was the version I had stitched together from the scraps of memory and what Michael had told me. But now, with those words cutting through me, the story I had lived by no longer felt like the truth. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to relive it. The screech of tires, the blinding glare of headlights too close, too sudden. The jolt of metal meeting metal, a sound so violent it seemed to split the air in two. The smell of smoke, sharp and suffocating. And then, nothing. Darkness. Like someone had pressed a switch inside me, erasing everything that came after. When I woke in the hospital, the lights were bright, the sheets stiff and white. My head throbbed, my body heavy with aches I couldn't place. Michael was there, his face hovering. His refusal to let me drive, the way he shadowed me through every room of the house for weeks afterward. But sitting here now, remembering the tone of his voice in that live photo, I realized it hadn't been love. It had been control. Was he protecting me? Or was he making sure I never pieced the truth together? I pressed my palms against my temples, the pounding in my head returning like it had the day I woke in the hospital. Had the accident even been an accident at all? Or had it been staged, orchestrated, the way his words had suggested? My mind flipped through every detail I could remember, each one now suspicious. The way he had refused to let me see the police report, insisting it was too upsetting. The way he drove my car to the mechanic himself,
never letting me step foot in the garage. The way he seemed too calm when recounting the story to friends, rehearsed, like he had practiced it. And then there was the memory I hadn't wanted to confront until now. My mother's face, pale and anxious, sitting beside my hospital bed when Michael had stepped out to talk to the doctor. She had leaned close, her hand trembling as it brushed my hair back. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice quivering, "there's something you should—" But she never finished. Michael had walked back in, and she snapped her mouth shut, her eyes darting to his face. She never brought it up again. What had she been about to tell me? I thought about it until the silence of the room became unbearable. My body buzzed with adrenaline, my mind racing in spirals I couldn't escape. The accident, the memory loss, the way Michael had woven himself so tightly into every detail afterward that I couldn't tell which parts were mine and which were his. The truth gnawed at me until I couldn't lie still. I sat up in bed, clutching the blanket to my chest, straining my ears to listen. Michael's steady breathing beside me should have been comforting, but instead it felt like a performance, a mask he wore even in sleep. I couldn't trust the rhythm of his breaths any more than I could trust the words he spoke. Hours passed like that, me lying stiff, awake, waiting for something I couldn't name. And then I heard it, the faint creak of the mattress shifting, the soft sound of footsteps on the hardwood, the click of the bedroom door easing shut. My heart leapt into my throat, devouring page after page of documents he fed into it. His face was illuminated by the glow, shadows carving sharp lines across his jaw. His expression was focused, grim, like a man erasing evidence, not memories. I clamped a hand over my mouth, stifling the gasp that rose in my throat. He wasn't protecting me. He was burning something, destroying something he never wanted me to see. And as I stood frozen in the hallway, my body trembling, I realized the truth wasn't just hidden. It was being erased before my eyes. I bit down on my trembling lip to keep from crying out as Michael fed another stack of papers into the flames, the firelight reflecting in his glasses, his voice a whisper meant only for himself. No one can ever know. The flames lit his face, and for the first time, I didn't recognize him. I had stared at Michael's face 1,000 times before. I knew the lines at the corners of his mouth, the way his brows arched when he smiled, the dimples that softened him when he laughed. But in that moment, crouched in his office in the middle of the night with firelight painting him in violent orange, he was a stranger. His eyes glistened with something unrecognizable, not warmth or love, but calculation. The man I thought I married seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who moved with icy precision. Through the crack in the door, I watched him slide another handful of papers into the flames. The fire consumed them greedily, curling the edges, blackening the words until they crumbled into ash. He didn't hesitate. He didn't wince. He didn't even look away. This wasn't a man reluctantly discarding something painful. This was ritual. This was control. And then came the whisper, "No one will ever know." The words crawled over my skin, tightening around my throat. His tone was steady, almost gentle, but the message beneath it was chilling. No one will ever know what? About the accident? About the woman's voice on the phone? About what he had been hiding all along? I pressed my palm hard against my mouth, afraid that even the sound of my breath would betray me. My body shook with the effort to stay silent, every instinct inside me screaming to run. But I couldn't move. I couldn't leave. I was rooted there, desperate to make out words before they disappeared, but he was too fast, too deliberate. He knew exactly what he was doing. Erasing, destroying, burying. My mind reeled with possibilities. Police reports, hospital notes, insurance files, things I had never seen because he had always told me they didn't matter, that they would only make me anxious. But they mattered enough for him to burn them in the dead of night. I gripped the doorframe, my nails digging into the wood. He looked so unlike himself in that glow, his jaw locked, his movements efficient, like this was something he had done before. My stomach twisted. How long had he been living in this shadowed world I never knew existed? He paused suddenly, holding a sheet in his hand, staring at it for longer than the others. His lips moved silently, like he was reading something he couldn't bring himself to destroy. His expression softened, then hardened again, and with a swift flick, he dropped it into the flames. I leaned in too far, the floor creaking beneath my bare foot. Michael's head snapped up. My breath caught in my throat. His eyes darted toward the door, narrowing, searching the dark. I froze, pressed flat against the wall, praying the shadows would shield me. But in that silence I knew. He had heard me. The seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last. Then the chair scraped against the floor as he stood. His footsteps moved closer, slow and deliberate, each one echoing down the hallway like a drumbeat of dread. The doorknob turned, the door swung open, and the light from the fire spilled into the hallway, washing over me. His eyes met mine, and for a moment there was no mask, no charm, no warmth, just cold recognition. His lips curved, not into a smile, but something harder, sharper. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and flat, carrying a finality that sent chills through me. Cliffhanger. His words hung in the smoke-filled air, heavy and sharp, and I realized with bone-deep certainty that whatever conversation was coming next, it would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. His words weren't a confession, they were a warning. The smoke from the fire still clung to the air between us, faint but suffocating, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. Michael closed the office door behind him, the faint click sealing. For a moment I thought I had misheard him, but his gaze was unflinching, his tone deliberate. Not an excuse, not a dismissal, a declaration. "What are you talking about?" I managed, my voice a whisper. He exhaled slowly, like a man carrying the weight of something too heavy. "The accident wasn't random, Rachel. It was a message. And everything since then, the calls, the folder, the shadows you think you're catching, none of it's in your head. They're watching you, watching us." My stomach dropped. My mind reeled, trying to fit his words into the puzzle I had been struggling to assemble. For months I thought I was paranoid, gaslit into silence, convinced I was losing my grip. But now he was confirming what I had suspected, and worse. I shook my head, pressing my back harder against the wall. "You're lying. This is another way to control me, to make me doubt myself." His jaw tightened. He dragged his hand through his hair, pacing once, twice, before stopping in front of me. "The folder you saw, the one with your photo in it wasn't about me cheating, Rachel. It was surveillance, on you. You've been monitored for months, every step, every word, recorded." My breath caught. The folder, the stranger, my face staring back at me from those papers. Could it be true? Or was this another manipulation, another twist in his endless game of power? "You expect me to believe that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "After everything? After calling me crazy in front of our friends? After hiding your second phone? After—" "I did it to protect you," he snapped, his voice cracking with urgency. For a fleeting second, I saw something raw in his eyes. Fear. Not of me, but for me. If you knew what really happened the night of the accident, if you understood who's behind this, you'd never sleep again. The memory of the crash surged back. Headlights, the scream of tires, then nothing. My hands clenched into fists. "Then tell me!" He shook his head slowly, as if the very act of speaking the truth might summon something into the room. "It's not that simple. They have eyes everywhere. Phones, cars, even the people you think are friends. You were never supposed to remember." The wall seemed to close in. His words were a trap, a prison, like the embers behind him. Because if you saw what was in them, if you started asking the wrong questions, they'd know you were waking up. And once they know... He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. "If you leave, you won't survive." I realized I wasn't just suspicious, I was a target. Michael's words replayed in my head like a song I couldn't escape. "They're watching us. If you leave, you won't survive." Was it true? Or just another mask, another trick to keep me tethered to him, drowning in his secrets? I didn't know. And that uncertainty was the worst kind of prison, because it forced me to live in two realities at once. On the surface, I smiled. I moved through the house with the same routines, kissed him good morning, laughed at his jokes when he tried to lighten the mood. I cooked dinner. I asked about his day. I even sat with him on the couch while the news played, letting my head rest on his shoulder like nothing had changed. If someone had walked in, they'd think we were any ordinary couple, tired from life but holding on to each other. But inside, I was unraveling. Every glance felt loaded, every word suspicious. Was his hand brushing mine at dinner an act of affection, or a way to remind me he still controlled the narrative? Was his warning about danger real, or a script to keep me scared enough not to leave? Love battled with fear in my chest, neither strong enough to win, both tearing me apart. I knew one thing. I couldn't take his words at face value anymore. I needed proof, evidence, something that wasn't filtered through his charm or his gaslighting, something that belonged to me. So I began my own investigation, quietly, carefully. When he left for a shower, I scanned his office, memorizing the placement of books and drawers so I could tell if he moved anything. When he fell asleep, I stayed awake, watching his chest rise and fall, listening for the slightest shift that meant he was pretending. When he left his phone on the counter, I noted the angle, the screen brightness, the way he guarded it even when he wasn't looking directly at it. And then, one evening, the opportunity arrived. Michael had tossed his jacket over the arm of the couch after coming in from a call. He muttered something about stepping into the kitchen, his voice casual, but I could tell. Why would he leave this so vulnerable? Unless he never thought I'd dare touch it. The home screen was bare. Few apps, no photos. Clean. Too clean. My thumb hovered, and then I opened the messages. At first it was nothing. A few threads, numbers with no names, blank bubbles of data that could mean anything. But then I saw it. A conversation marked with a recent timestamp. I tapped it, and the words bloomed across the screen like poison. She's asking questions. Keep her calm. Don't let her dig. She can't know, at least not yet. The phone trembled in my hands as though it were alive, as though the words themselves were shaking me. They weren't just talking about me. They were strategizing, planning, deciding what I was allowed to know, when I was allowed to know it. A surge of nausea rose in my chest, my vision blurred, tears spilling before I could stop them. My entire body shook, rage and terror colliding inside me like sparks against dry kindling. I heard the faucet turn off in the kitchen. His footsteps moved closer. My fingers clenched tighter around the phone. I should have put it back, should have pretended I hadn't seen, but the words burned too deeply into me to let go. I stared at the message glowing in my hand. She can't know, at least not yet. When I heard his voice behind me, closer than I expected, sharper than I was ready for. What are you doing? The second phone wasn't a secret lover, it was a second life. My hands shook as I held it, the dim glow of the screen washing my face in pale light. This wasn't just a burner phone. It wasn't a backup or some cheap second line for work. It was a world I had never been allowed to see, a shadow parallel to the life we lived together. And now it was open in my palm, buzzing with truths I wasn't supposed to touch. I scrolled through the threads with trembling fingers, the names, if they were names at all, feeling like something out of a nightmare. Blackthorn, Lark, A.6. Not friends, not co-workers, not family. These were aliases, handles, code names. The kind of language you used when you couldn't risk leaving a trail. I clicked one at random, the most recent. The list is almost complete. Delivery scheduled. Keep her steady until it's done. No mistakes this time. My chest tightened. My fragile version of reality I had clung to. She can't access the list. Don't let her find out about the delivery. Her memory gap is the only advantage we have. My hand flew to my mouth. Memory gap. The accident. My lost hours. My fractured recall of that night. They knew. They had built their plan on the very pieces of me that had been erased. The phone buzzed again. A vibration so sudden it nearly leapt from my hands. I gasped, fumbling as the screen lit with a new message, fresh and alive, delivered while I was holding it. My pulse roared in my ears as the words appeared, stark and undeniable. Is she still in the dark? The question stared at me, blinking on the screen like an accusation, like a spotlight aimed directly at me. My hands trembled violently. The air sucked out of the room.
Whoever was on the other end didn't just know about me. They were waiting for confirmation, right now. And the phone was in my hands. My breath caught as the screen pulsed in the silence. The words burning into me. Is she still in the dark? While just a few feet away, I heard Michael's footsteps returning down the hall. He wasn't meeting a lover. He was meeting a stranger who knew my name. For days, the second phone haunted me. The messages, the coded names, the fresh text that had arrived while I held it. It all sat like a stone in my chest, heavy and suffocating. Michael's explanation, his whispers about people watching us, about danger lurking in shadows, might have once left me shaken into silence. But now, with proof in my hand, silence was no longer an option. When he left the house that evening, muttering something vague about a late meeting, I didn't stay behind like the obedient wife he expected. I grabbed my keys, slipped on my coat, and followed. My heart hammered against my ribs as I trailed him at a careful distance, headlights dimmed, keeping far enough back that he wouldn't suspect. I half expected him to pull into another office building, maybe a hotel if the affair theory wasn't as dead as I thought. But instead, he turned into a quiet street and parked outside a cafe. It wasn't the kind of place you went for a casual latte. The windows were dark, the sign half burned out.
Study the chalkboard menu while angling myself to hear. Their voices were low, almost swallowed by the hum of the espresso machine, but certain words carried, slicing through the air with terrifying clarity. Her name is already on the list. The stranger's voice was calm, measured, like he was reading off the weather. But the effect on me was catastrophic. My stomach flipped, my vision swam. The list. The same list I had seen mentioned on the second phone. The same list connected to the folder, the messages, the lies. And now I knew. I was on it. Michael leaned forward, his voice sharp with urgency. She suspects. I'm doing everything I can to contain it, but she's not letting it go. The stranger's gaze didn't waver. He lifted the briefcase and placed it on the table with a precision that made my skin crawl. Slowly, he opened it, pulling out a folder. My folder. I knew it before I saw it. The same folder I had caught a glimpse of once before. The one Michael had received under the cover of secrecy. And now it was open again. Under the glow of a flickering bulb, its contents exposed. Even from my distance, I recognized it. The photograph. My face staring back at me, frozen mid-smile. An image pulled from some hidden lens I had never noticed. Notes scribbled in margins. Dates. Locations. Patterns of my life I hadn't even known I was making, mapped out on paper. My knees went weak. I gripped the counter to steady myself, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. Michael's voice broke through again, a whisper laced with desperation. She can't know the truth. If she remembers... The stranger cut him off with a look so sharp it could have drawn blood. He leaned in closer, his voice low but heavy enough to reach me where I stood. If she ever remembers. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The unfinished threat hung in the air, darker than anything spoken outright. My hand tightened on the counter, my pulse roaring in my ears, as I realized the danger wasn't just about lies or betrayal anymore. Remembering the truth could cost me my life. The memory I wasn't supposed to have came rushing back. I staggered out of the cafe and into the screech of tires, headlights blinding in the rain, the sickening crunch of metal folding into metal, the jolt that threw my body sideways, pain ricocheting through me, my head hitting something hard, the world tilting, the smell of gasoline sharp in the air. But there was more. Something I had never remembered before. A voice. A woman's voice, low, urgent. Not panicked, not like a passerby stumbling on a wreck. Calm, controlled. She's still breathing. Get him out first. I bolted upright in bed, my chest heaving. The sound of that voice echoed in my skull, too clear to be imagined. Someone had been there. Someone had spoken. And they hadn't been talking about me. They had been giving instructions.
The accident hadn't been random. It had been staged, or at least someone had been waiting for it. Tears burned down my cheeks, but I couldn't stop them. I pressed my palms to my temples, trying to block out the flood, but more memories surged through. The flash of a dark car swerving too close, Michael shouting something I couldn't make out, my hands gripping the wheel, my heart hammering, and then blackness. I had believed Michael's silence afterward was his way of protecting me from pain. His refusal to answer questions, his insistence on controlling the narrative, his relentless monitoring of me in the hospital. But now I saw it differently. He hadn't been protecting me. He had been keeping me quiet, making sure the truth didn't slip through. And yet, part of me hesitated. Because if that voice at the crash was real, if people had been there, then maybe Michael's secrecy had kept me alive. Maybe his gaslighting wasn't about power, it was about survival. The contradiction twisted inside me, leaving me breathless. How could I hate him for destroying my trust, while also believing he might have been the only thing standing between me and something darker? I curled into myself, shaking. The image of the folder in the cafe burned into my mind. My photo, my name on a list, my life mapped like a target. And then the live photo. His voice whispering that I would never know what happened that night. It all pointed back to the same truth. The accident was no accident. And then another memory surfaced, not from the crash, but from the days that followed. The hospital had known. She had tried to warn me. And Michael had silenced her. I lay there trembling, the pieces of the accident snapping into place as the image of my mother's unfinished words echoed louder than ever. Proof that the truth had been buried not just in fire and folders, but in my own family's silence. The man I thought was my husband was really my handler. Michael sat across from me in the dim glow of his office, the last traces of smoke still curling faintly in the air from the papers he had burned. His face was pale, strained, his jaw tight as though each word he was about to say carried the weight of a life he could no longer hide. For years I had called him my husband, my partner, my safe place. But now, as his eyes met mine, cold and desperate, I felt that word, husband, collapse under the weight of everything he wasn't telling me. "I didn't choose this," he began, his voice low, hoarse, like gravel scraping against glass. "You need to understand that before anything else. I didn't choose them. I didn't choose this life." My throat tightened. "Them?" He raked a hand through his hair, pacing the room like a man trapped inside a cage he had built with his own hands. "The organization. I was tied to them long before you, before us, before our life together. When I met you, I prayed that I was free. But no one ever really leaves. And when I tried to walk away, they made sure I couldn't." I felt my chest seize, my breath shallow. "The accident," I whispered, my voice trembling. His eyes flickered to mine, haunted, filled with something that looked like both guilt and sorrow. He nodded once. "Yes, that night was no coincidence. They forced you off the road. They didn't want to kill you, not then, but they wanted control, leverage. And I gave it to them. I let them use you because I didn't see another way." The words hit me like a physical blow. My legs trembled beneath me, and I gripped the edge of the desk to keep myself upright. My husband, my Michael, the man who had held my hand in hospital rooms and whispered promises of safety, had been living a double life. And worse, he had let me bleed for it. Leverage! Protecting me. All the lies, the secrecy, the nights you disappeared. I told myself you were keeping me safe, but all along, you weren't my protector. You were my jailer, my handler. He flinched at the word, his hands trembling as they reached toward me, then fell back at his sides. "Don't call me that," he begged. "I never wanted that role. I wanted to be your husband. I wanted to give you a normal life. Every lie I told, every secret I kept, it was the only way to keep them from pulling you deeper into this." I shook my head violently, choking on the sob that clawed its way out of me. "You don't get to decide what part of my life I'm allowed to know. You don't get to rewrite my past and call it love." For a long, heavy silence, neither of us moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the desk lamp, the faint whisper of the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, Michael's voice broke through, quieter now, fragile. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to. But if you walk away now, if you try to run, they'll see it. They're already watching, Emily. They always are. And if they know you remember, if they know the pieces are coming back together. His voice faltered, his eyes burning into mine with a desperation that chilled me to my core. It's over. For both of us. His warning hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as I realized that my survival and the truth were now tied to a man I could no longer trust, but could not yet escape. I thought the danger was him, but the real enemy was bigger than us both. For days after Michael's confession, I moved through the house like a ghost. My footsteps were careful, my words measured, every movement tinged with fear. But not just fear of him, fear of what surrounded us. Fear of the invisible net that seemed to tighten every time I remembered another detail. I couldn't shake the image of the stranger in the cafe, of the folder with my photo, of the text on the second phone that still pulsed in my mind. She can't know, not yet. I wanted to hate Michael. Every part of me screamed to. He had lied to me for years, played the role of husband while secretly monitoring me like a subject. He had stood by while I bled on the pavement, while my memories fractured into silence. He had let me believe that love meant safety, when really
Make me part of his cage. He had built the bars out of half-truths and silences and called them love, and I was done playing the victim inside of it. I remember the exact moment the shift happened. I was standing at the kitchen sink, staring out at the empty backyard where we had once planned to build a garden. My reflection in the window was pale, hollow-eyed, almost unrecognizable. That was when it hit me. The woman looking back wasn't a wife anymore. She wasn't a partner. She wasn't even a survivor. She was a fighter, waiting to step out of the shadows. I dried my hands, turned, and found Michael watching me from the doorway. His expression was guarded, cautious, as though he could sense the shift inside me. "You've been quiet," he said, his tone carefully neutral. I held his gaze. "Because I've been thinking." His jaw tightened. "About what?" "About how long you've been lying to me. About the organization, about the accident, about what you're not telling me. Because I know, Michael, I know there's still more, and I'm done pretending I don't deserve the truth." The silence that followed was suffocating. His eyes flickered, guilt and fear warring in them, but he said nothing. So I stepped closer, closing the gap between us, my voice steady even as my hands shook. "I need to know everything. Not pieces, not your half-truths, not what you think I can handle. I want all of it. What really happened that night? What did you do? What did they do?" My voice broke on the last word, but I didn't back down. I locked my eyes on his and demanded the one thing he had never given me. What really happened that night? The truth wasn't about betrayal. It was about survival. Michael's face tightened at my question, the silence stretching so long I thought he might refuse me again. But then, with a heaviness that seemed to crush him from the inside, he sat down, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them against a cold that only he could feel. "You deserve the truth," he said finally, his voice rough, hollow. "But once you hear it, there's no going back." I crossed my arms, my body stiff, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Then your patterns." And then, that night, they set it in motion. The other car? It wasn't an accident. It was a message. They didn't mean to kill you, but they wanted you broken enough that you couldn't fight, couldn't ask questions. And it worked. Your memory loss became their shield. And I became your handler. My job was to keep you in the dark. I stumbled back, my hand pressing against the wall, my head spinning. So every time you told me not to worry, every time you called me paranoid, you were just following orders? His eyes dropped. At first, yes, but then it became survival. If I didn't play along, if I didn't convince you that nothing was wrong, they would have finished what they started. And I couldn't risk losing you. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. "You already lost me," I whispered. His expression shattered.
I know. The room fell silent, heavy with the ghosts of years of lies. And yet, beneath all the pain, something else stirred inside me. Strength. Resolve. The pieces of me that had been chipped away by gaslighting, secrecy, and fear began to knit back together. Not into the woman I had been before, but into someone new, someone stronger. For so long, I had been the victim of Michael's choices, of the organization's control, of a past I couldn't remember. But now, the memories were mine again. The truth was mine again, and with it came power. I stepped closer, my voice steady despite the tears still wet on my cheeks. You've kept me silent. You've kept me afraid. But no more. If they're watching me, then let them watch. Because I won't hide. I won't let my life be theirs to control. Michael's eyes widened, fear flashing through them. Emily, please, if you fight, they'll come harder. They'll destroy you. I shook my head. No, they already tried. They failed. I'm still here, and now I know the truth. That's the one thing they didn't want me to have, and it's the one thing they can't take back. The weight in my chest began to lift, replaced by a fire that spread through me, burning away the last remnants of doubt. I wasn't just reclaiming my memory. I was reclaiming my voice, my strength, my future.
Of your life. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to hit like so more people see it. Drop your own "I knew I wasn't crazy" moment in the comments, and subscribe with the bell on, because every week I bring you more twists, secrets, and truths you can't stop watching. Oh, and share this with a friend who needs the reminder to always trust their instincts.